Okay, we're going to read from Judges 16, 4 through 21. Samson and Delilah. Many of you will know this story. So, hope you're all doing well. It's the day before Sunday, so it's a practice sermon, but I try to do the best I can to get it to be as accurate to the real sermon. So let's go through this. Again, Judges 16, 4 through 21. Sometime later, he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, "See if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength, and how we can overpower him, so we may tie him up and subdue him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver." So Delilah said to Samson, "Tell me the secret of your great strength and how you can be tied up and subdued." Samson answered her, "If anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that we have not been dried, I'll be as weak as any other man." Then the rulers of the Philistines brought her 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been dried, and she tied him with them. With men hidden in the room, she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But he snapped the bowstrings as easily as a piece of string straps when it comes close to a flame. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. Then Delilah said to Samson, "You have made a fool of me. You lied to me. Come now, tell me how you can be tied." He said, "If anyone ties me securely with new ropes that they have never been used, I'll become as weak as any other man." So Delilah took new ropes and tied him with them. Then, with men hidden in the room, she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But he snapped the rope off his arms as if they were threads. Delilah then said to Samson, "All this time you have been making a fool of me and lying to me. Tell me how you can be tied." He replied, "If you weave the 7 braids of my head into fabric on the loom and tighten it with a pin, I'll be as weak as any other man." So while he was sleeping, Delilah took the 7 braids of his head, wove them into the fabric, and tightened it with a pin. Again she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." She awoke his sleep and pulled up the pin and the loom with the fabric. Then she said to him, "How can you say I love you when you won't confide in me? This is the 3rd time you made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength." With such nagging, she prodded him day after day until he was sick to death. So he told her everything. "No razor has ever been used on my head," he said, "because I have been a Nazarite," he said, "dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man." When Delilah saw that he had told her everything, she went and sent the word to the rulers of the Philistines. "Come back once more, he told me everything." So the rulers of the Philistines returned with silver in their hands after putting him to sleep on her lap. She called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of his hair. So he began to subdue him, and his strength left him. Then she called, "Samson, the Philistines are on you." He awoke from his sleep and thought, "I'll go out as before and shake myself free." But he did not know that the Lord had left him. Then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza. Binding him with bronze shackles, they sent him to grinding grain in the prison. But the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. The word of the Lord for the people of God. Identity. Bob Marley, they have hats now that have Bob Marley hats with identity, with hair. Some people are famous and they have hair, and it's part of their identity. Bob Marley was known for his hair. He had dreadlocks, and dreadlocks became extremely popular with him. And Bob Marley was quoted by John Lennon. John Lennon said that Bob Marley was the most influential, according to him, artist of the 70s. So Bob Marley was much more than his hair, as he was a great lyricist. He was always fighting for his country and for freedom for Jamaican people, and also against anti-colonialism. But his hair was a big part of who he was. It was part of his religion, as Rastafari, and he turned to Christianity supposedly before he passed. But he was in Europe, and he was dying of cancer. And I remember seeing a documentary of Bob Marley, and he had shaved his head, which that was so much as you can't imagine Bob Marley without his hair, his dreads. So his hair was totally shaved, and he was so weak from the cancer, and he was so skinny, and the hair made him look much bigger. He wasn't a very big man, but he was big in stature. He was a legend, as one of his albums is Legend. But he was so sick, so skinny, so small, and with knowing how tiny he actually really was when he shaved his head. And when he was dying of cancer, and he went from Europe, and finally he went to Miami, Florida in 1981. He passed away at the age of 36, but his hair was such a big part of who he was. Samson, a big part of his identity was his hair. He was a Nazarite. As he was born, his mother was barren. And an angel came and said, "You're going to have a son, and he's going to be holy. He's going to be a Nazarite." A Nazarite is a priest. But the Nazarites has to do three things. She sure enough had Samson. They can't do three things, excuse me. One, they can't drink. Two, they cannot touch unclean corpses. Three, they cannot cut their hair. Samson never cut his hair. He always had hair, grew out his hair from the beginning when he was born. Now Samson had a downfall. Foreign women. Say, well, foreign women, no big deal. Because today it's popular that we date different people from different cultures. And it's not a big deal. But back then, when you dated someone foreign, it was looked down upon. And he was an Israelite, and his parents even looked down upon him. His wife, as it talks about in the preceding chapters, was Philistine. But now, in this text, he meets another woman, Delilah. Now, she is in the valley, Sorek. Now, this is on the border of Philistine. So the Philistines had power, or the Philistines or Philistine, however you want to pronounce it, it's pronounced two different ways, had power over the Israelites. But they couldn't defeat the powerful Samson. He was a nemesis. And they wanted to take him down. But his one downfall was women. He dated foreign women. It was looked down upon at that time. And Delilah, they figured, we can get Delilah to manipulate him. And they offered her a lot of money, 1,100 shekels. 1,100 shekels is 100 days of work. And the rulers came, and each ruler was to give her 1,100 shekels. How many rulers were there? I'm not really sure. But she would have made a lot of money. She made a lot of money of what she was going to do to manipulate Samson, as they were supposedly to be in love. And here Samson, she asks him, as she's manipulating him, how do you become weak? As you're so powerful, you're so strong, as he's proved it over and over in the preceding text. And he tells her that if you get 7 bowstrings and you make them dry and tie me up with them, I will become weak as any other man. So through her manipulation, she gets and tells the Philistines, and they come in. There's even someone in the room, and they tie him up with the bowstrings. And she says, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. They're upon you. And sure enough, he's tied up, and he just breaks out of them. And those Philistines, they must have really been scared. They must have ran like heck. I would have liked to have been there and run, and they probably ran some more. And then the manipulation gets worse. You have to be careful of manipulation. Manipulation of people are toxic. You have to stay away from people that are manipulative, because it's like they are coming and they will use anything to hurt you. So she's trying to hurt him. She's trying to manipulate. And they will do things like this. In the text, I'm reading from this text of this manipulation. She says, you're making a fool out of me. Manipulators play the victim and put it on your court to make you look like you're hurting them when really they're hurting you. So be careful of that. So they put it on your court. They play the victim. You're making a fool of me. Tell me the truth. You're lying. And they will say you're lying. So he says, okay, go ahead and get fresh ropes. Tie me up. I'll be like any other man. Now he knows the Philistines are going to want to kill him. And sure enough, they tie him up. She ties him up, and a man comes out and says, the Philistines are upon you. And now they should know, the Philistines. They should know that this is not going to work because they've already tried it. The Israelites came to him in a cave after he took a jawbone of a donkey and killed an abundance of Philistines. And he ran into a cave. And they wanted, the Israelites were saying, we're going to take you to the Philistines so they can capture you. And they put him in new ropes, and he broke out of them like nothing. They should have known that this wasn't going to work with Delilah, but they still tried it. So the ropes, next thing you know, the Philistines are on you. Breaks out of them like nothing. Now she says, you're lying to me. You're making a fool of me. Again, when you hear that, them playing the victim. You're lying to me. There's a sense of lying and not telling your business, not letting your dirty laundry out there or letting things be sent out there that can hurt you. He knows that. So he's taking a roundabout way. It's okay to take a roundabout way when you're dealing with manipulators. You really have to be like a matador and olay them because they're toxic. Stay away from toxic people. They will only bring you down. People don't change. Delilah wasn't going to change. She wanted that money. She was there to manipulate her until the job was done. Now she's really trying harder. So, olay the manipulators. She says, you're making a fool. You're lying. He's not lying. He's taking a roundabout way. Really, the bowstrings did hinder him. He wasn't totally free to go after the Philistines, but he was hindered a little bit, even though he broke out of them. The ropes, the same thing. He was tied up. It didn't take him much, but he was tied up. It didn't inhibit him. So he wasn't necessarily lying. He was protecting himself and taking a roundabout way of telling, this is what will keep me down. So the third time, he says, take my hair, braid it with pins and fabric. Now this is where we understand that his hair is coarse. It's never been cut. So when you think of his hair, Samson's hair, don't think of like Fabio. I know. Think of Eurocentric things. Think of more like Bob Marley, but not quite there, where Bob Marley had the dreadlocks, but he had a lot more than 7 of them. So they made 7 of them, and remember that the hair is coarse. It's tough. So she braided them in, and she had to use pins and fabric. This is really tough hair. So it is more like a dreadlock than it is more Eurocentric like Fabio, but not quite to the extreme as dreadlocks. So she does this. She thinks she's got him and manipulates him and says, okay. And the man's in the room and the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And he says, gets up and like no problem at all, even though his head is inhibited, is tight, real tight. If you ever had braids in your hair, you know it gets tight. And he goes and chases them away, and they must run, and run some more. So she hits this one. If you hear this, if you love me, if you really love me, you would tell me the truth, and you are not confiding in me. If you hear anything like this, if you really love me, or if you really blank, 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 there's a good chance you're being manipulated. Be very careful of that. Again, obey that. If you really, because what that is saying is if you really, they want you to do what they want you to do. That's manipulation. They're getting to you to do what they want you to do. They're crafty. They're smart like that. And we have to look at ourselves in the mirror sometimes and say to ourselves, are we manipulators? And really look at ourselves and say, are we manipulating other people? Are we trying to say things to get people to do other things? Because it's not healthy. It really hurts people. If you really love me, you would do this. It's making you get your way. It's a selfish way of doing things. It's crafty. It's cunning. Manipulation. Stay away from people that are toxic. So he tells her, and it says in verse 16, that he is so tired of her nagging him and manipulating him and telling him, you're lying to me. If you really loved me. It says that he's tired. He is totally vexed out. And he gives in. He says, just cut my hair. Cut my hair with a razor. It has to be with a razor. So they cut. She has a man in the room, and here's the thing. She lulls him to sleep. The Hebrew says lulls him to sleep. And on her lap. It says knees in Hebrew, but really it's on her lap. To make us have an idea of it. And he's tired and he's sleeping. But here's the thing, is a man comes in the room. Not only does the man come in the room, but then he cuts the hair, which has never been cut before. You know how hard this is? With a razor. We're not one of them zip razors that are zip, zip, zip. That still would be hard to cut. But with a razor, and you have to get in there. I mean, really in there to cut that. 7 of them, 7 locks to cut his hair. So you look at the text, there's definitely some sexual undertones in there, to be brutally honest with you. And also, there was a chance that she possibly had given him something because a man came in the room. What did she put in his food or drink? We don't know. But those are my ideas. Because he cuts the locks and you really have to get, and really, it's a lot of cutting coarse hair. So it happens. He's still sleeping. And she wakes and says, the Philistines are upon you. And sure enough, he is as weak as a dead branch. But he thinks he still has the strength of God. God's strength left him. And they take him. And it says that she subdues him in verse 19. Different translations. But this word, the Hebrew word, means that she torments him. She humiliates him. Kind of like this. Someone would say to you now, you want to lie to me? This is why you deserve this. You want to lie to me? This is why you get this and this happened to you. That's what manipulators do. And they put it back on your court and make it your fault, always your fault. Be careful of manipulators. You want to lie to me? You want to not tell me the truth? You really don't love me? When you hear that, that's usually a manipulation tactic. And this is why this happened. And she's tormenting him. And then they come in and they torment and humiliate. And that's part of the culture of war. This was the nemesis of the Philistines. He was a judge This was before kings. He was a judge and a priest of Israel. Samson, not a very good judge, but he was a judge. And they had him. Humiliation, this is the culture. They gouged his eyes out and made him go into just to do slave work, grinding grain. So they humiliated him too, just as Delilah humiliated Samson. And she got her money. And the question is, the downfall of Samson really foreign women? Was that the downfall? Most times you think, well, he cut his hair. That was the downfall. And he was dating foreign women. That's most things you think of. Well, he cut his hair, and that's the story. Was it the foreign women that was the downfall? No, it was not. It was part of it. Don't get me wrong. But here's the downfall. He's a Nazarite. He's a priest. You can't do three things. I don't know how many fingers I'm putting up there, but you can't do three things. We'll point it out to you. One, again, you can't drink. Two, you can't touch unclean corpses. Three, you can't cut your hair. First one we'll go over is, why did he lose his strength? He struck out through all three of the things he did. And in this text it shows us. In the preceding text it shows us. One, in the preceding text, he touches an unclean corpse. He takes a lion and rips it open. And then comes back and there's honey in it. And not only does he take that honey, he gives it to his parents and doesn't tell them that it was from an unclean corpse. So strike one. Strike two is when he married, as it says, he marries a Philistine wife. Now, we don't know if Delilah was Philistine or not, but we know she was in that area. We're not totally sure. But he did marry a Philistine wife prior to Delilah. And they had 30 men that they just made like groomsmen. And at that time, they had a party before the wedding. And the scholars believe that's when he drank. So that's strike two. He drank sometime in that period when he got married in the party. The third with Delilah, where she manipulated him, and be careful of manipulators. Be careful of some of their wording. If you really love me, if you really anything, if you blank, blank, blank. Be careful of that. Obey that. But the third was he had his hair cut. That's strike three. He disobeyed God. That's why. It wasn't foreign women. It wasn't really his hair. It was part of it. The hair was the third strike. But it was he disobeyed the Lord. You can't disobey the Lord. When the Lord tells you to do something, as the Lord told Samson's mom, he's a Nazarite. He can't do these things. You have to be obedient to the Lord and obedient to the Lord's ways. He closed all the doors from the Lord. The Lord couldn't come into him, couldn't give him strength because he slammed all the doors shut from the Lord. You can't slam the doors shut of the Lord. You have to keep the door open for the Lord to come into you, to come and let the Holy Spirit come into you, to let him guide you, to give you strength because you're going to need that strength. And that strength totally went out of Samson because he struck out. You cannot strike out. You cannot strike out. How do you keep yourself from not striking out? Keep the door open. Keep the door open. It's that simple. Let God stay in your heart. Keep that relationship with God. Don't close him out. When one door closes, God opens another door. So make sure your doors are open. You let Jesus in. You have the past where your strength. Sometimes we feel shame and humility of our past. But here's the strength. Jesus went on that cross and got rid of our shame and humility. Because of that cross, we're forgiven of our sin. And he's with us presently. So he gives us strength from the past. Get rid of it. That's the strength. It's over and done with. It's water on the bridge, water under the bridge. He went on that cross for that. He's with you each and every day. He walks with you. He talks with you. He tells you he is your own. In the present, you're going to go through things. Cancer, domestic problems, financial problems, work problems. All kinds of problems you're going to have. All kinds of problems. But in the present, God will be with you. Jesus walks with you each and every step. And when you can't walk just like footsteps, as I mentioned before, he carries you. And in the future, there's going to be trials. Life is a roller coaster. It is up and it is down. Up and down. And in the future, when you get to the future, God already has a plan. If you didn't strike out, he's already working on your plans in the future. He has plans for you. Plans for you to prosper. Just as it says in Jeremiah 29:11. He's with you. It's not to say you're not going to have hard times. But through those future hard times, the strength is there. The strength will not leave you because you kept the doors open. You didn't strike out. Don't slam doors shut on God and keep him out of your life. Don't keep Jesus, the King of Kings, the Prince of Peace, the great I Am, out of your life. Keep the door open. When he opens another door and slams one door shut, walk through that one. You're going to have troubles. The big thing is this.